When I see equations, I see colors. The letter X is dark brown. The letter N is violet. I always thought that made me strange, different. Then I learned about a man from India who died before I was even 2 years old. His name was Srinivasa Ramanujan. This man received mathematical formulas in his dreams. A goddess would write them on a screen of flowing blood. He would wake up and copy them down. No calculation, no derivation, just answers, appearing in his sleep. And they were correct. Results that had defeated the greatest mathematicians in Europe. He saw them while sleeping. G.H. Hardy rated mathematical ability on a scale of 100. He gave himself 25. He gave Ramanujan 100. I never met this man, but I have spent years thinking about how his mind worked, and I think I finally understand. The story begins in 1913 with a letter. G.H. Hardy was one of the greatest mathematicians in England. Cold, analytical, an atheist who believed only in logic and proof. One morning, he received a strange package from India. The handwriting was unusual, the paper was cheap, and the man who wrote it was a nobody, a clerk at some shipping office in Madras, earning barely enough to survive. Hardy almost threw it away, but something made him look closer. The letter contained page after page of mathematical formulas, theorems, identities, results that Hardy had never seen before. Some of them looked like nonsense. Others looked too beautiful to be true. Hardy spent the entire evening going through these formulas with his colleague Littlewood, and slowly they realized what they were looking at. Hardy later wrote, "They defeated me completely. I had never seen anything in the least like them before." This was not a fraud. This was not a crank. This was someone operating at a level that Hardy, one of the best mathematicians in the world, could not comprehend. He wrote back to Ramanujan immediately, and he asked the obvious question: where did these formulas come from? How did you derive them? Ramanujan's answer was simple. He said, "They came to me in my dreams." Now, if someone told me that today, I would be skeptical, very skeptical. But I've learned to pay attention when the results are real, and Ramanujan's results were very, very real. Let me tell you what I know about Ramanujan's life, because I think his background explains everything. He was born in 1887 in a small town in southern India. His family was poor. His father worked as a clerk in a cloth shop, but from the beginning there was something different about this boy. At age 10, he was already doing mathematics that his teachers could not understand. By 15, he got his hands on an old math textbook, a book containing thousands of theorems, but almost no proofs. Now, most students would have been lost. They would need someone to show them the way, to hold their hand, to explain why things work. But Ramanujan did something extraordinary. He worked through theorem after theorem, proving them himself, by himself. No teacher, no guidance, just him and the mathematics. And then he started discovering new ones. By the time he was 17, he was doing original research, mathematics that no one had ever seen before. But here is where his story becomes painful to me. Ramanujan was so obsessed with math that he ignored everything else. He failed his college exams because he refused to study any other subject. He tried again at a different school. He failed again. No degree, no credentials, no future. He got married. He needed money. So he took a job as a clerk processing shipping documents. Think about that. One of the greatest mathematical minds in history was stamping papers in a shipping office. But every night, after work, he would pull out his notebooks and he would write thousands of formulas, theorems, discoveries. He tried to share his work with mathematicians in India. They did not understand it. Some thought he was crazy. So he started writing letters to mathematicians in England. The first ignored him. The second did not respond. And then he wrote to Hardy. That letter changed everything. Hardy arranged for Ramanujan to come to Cambridge. Think about what that meant. A young man from southern India who had never left his country, who was deeply religious and strictly vegetarian, traveling to cold, gray England just months before World War I began. He had never experienced a real winter. Cambridge winters dropped below freezing. He couldn't find proper food. He was alone, surrounded by people who didn't understand his culture, his beliefs, or his way of thinking. But he went anyway, because mathematics was more important to him than comfort, more important than safety, more important than anything. And when he arrived, Hardy finally saw what he was dealing with. Ramanujan became a Fellow of the Royal Society, one of the highest honors in British science, one of the first Indians to ever receive it. The boy who had failed college twice was now recognized as one of the greatest mathematicians alive. Now let me tell you about the dreams, because this is where I had to throw out everything I thought I knew. Hardy once said that his collaboration with Ramanujan was the one romantic incident in my life. Think about that. Hardy, the cold, logical atheist, used the word romantic to describe a mathematical partnership. He had never met anyone like Ramanujan. None of them had. Here was a man who could look at a problem and simply see the answer. No steps, no derivation, just truth, appearing fully formed. It drove Hardy crazy. He would ask Ramanujan, "How do you know this is true?" And Ramanujan would say, "I just know." That is not how mathematics works. You need proof. You need logic. You need to show your work. But Ramanujan's results kept being correct, again and again and again. Ramanujan described his process to a friend. Let me read you exactly what he said. "While asleep, I had an unusual experience. There was a red screen formed by flowing blood, as it were. I was observing it. Suddenly, a hand began to write on the screen. I became all attention. That hand wrote a number of elliptic integrals. They stuck to my mind. As soon as I woke up, I committed them to writing. The goddess, Namagiri. That is who he believed was writing those formulas. Now, I am a scientist. I do not believe in goddesses writing on screens of blood, but I do believe in the unconscious mind. You see, I have experienced something similar myself. Not as dramatic, not as vivid, but similar. When I am working on a problem, really working on it, my mind does not stop when I go to sleep. I dream about physics. I wake up thinking about physics. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, I wake up with an insight that I did not have the night before. The difference between me and Ramanujan is the scale. My unconscious gives me hints, little nudges, fragments of ideas that I have to piece together. Ramanujan's unconscious gave him complete theorems, fully formed, ready to write down. How is this possible? I think I know. Here is what I believe was happening inside Ramanujan's mind. From the age of 15, he did nothing but mathematics. He was completely, obsessively, totally devoted to it. While other students went to class, he was filling notebooks with formulas. While other young men were socializing, he was exploring number theory. While other people slept normally, his mind kept working on mathematics, year after year after year. Now, I have talked a lot about how understanding works, how learning works, and I have come to believe something important. When you truly understand something, you do not need to memorize it. You can see it. You can feel it. The knowledge becomes part of how you think. Most people learn mathematics as a set of rules. Do this, then do that, and you get the answer. But that is not understanding. That is just following instructions. Real understanding means you can see why something is true. You can feel it in your bones. Ramanujan spent 10 years building that kind of understanding, alone, in poverty, with no one to guide him. By the time he wrote that letter to Hardy, he had internalized so many patterns, so many relationships, so many mathematical structures, that his unconscious mind could see things his conscious mind could not. The dreams were not magic. They were the result of relentless training. His brain had become a pattern recognition machine of extraordinary power. And when he slept, that machine kept running. The goddess Namagiri was his way of explaining something he could not understand about himself. His unconscious was operating at such a high level that it felt like divine intervention. But it was not divine. It was human. Deeply, extraordinarily human. Let me tell you one more story that illustrates how Ramanujan's mind worked. Hardy went to visit Ramanujan in the hospital. Ramanujan was very sick. He had tuberculosis. To make conversation, Hardy mentioned that he had arrived in taxi number 1729. "Rather a dull number," Hardy said. He was just making small talk. Ramanujan immediately shook his head. "No, Hardy. It is a very interesting number. It is the smallest number expressible as the sum of two cubes in two different ways." Hardy checked later. 1729 equals 1 cubed plus 12 cubed. It also equals 9 cubed plus 10 cubed. Ramanujan was right. Instantly. But here's what fascinates me. Ramanujan did not calculate this. He did not sit there adding cubes in his head. He simply saw it. Immediately. The way you or I would recognize a friend's face in a crowd. He once said that every number was like a personal friend to him. He knew their properties the way you know the personalities of people you love. That's what a decade of obsessive focus does to a mind. The knowledge becomes so deep, so integrated, that it feels like intuition, like magic, like a goddess whispering in your ear. But it is not magic. It is the result of work. Extraordinary, relentless, obsessive work. Ramanujan never fully recovered from his illness. The English climate had destroyed his health. The cold, the lack of proper food, the isolation, the stress of trying to prove his intuitions in ways that satisfied Western mathematicians. It all took its toll. He returned to India in 1919, hoping to get better. He did not. On April 26, 1920, Srinivasa Ramanujan died. He was 32 years old. But even on his deathbed, he was still working, still receiving formulas, still writing them down. In his final letter to Hardy, he described something new, a type of mathematical function that no one had ever seen before. He called them Mach theta functions. Hardy could not understand what Ramanujan was talking about. Neither could anyone else. It took mathematicians 82 years to figure it out. In 2002, researchers finally proved that Ramanujan's deathbed formulas were correct, and they discovered something remarkable. These functions, dreamed up by a dying man in 1920, can be used to understand black holes. Black holes, a concept that did not even exist when Ramanujan was alive. How did he see something that no one else could see for another century? I do not fully know, and that is what keeps me humble. I have spent my life trying to understand how discovery works, how creativity happens, how we find things that no one has found before. And Ramanujan taught me something important. The answers do not come from nowhere. They come from preparation, from obsession, from falling so deeply in love with a subject that your mind never stops working on it, even when you sleep. Ramanujan called it the goddess Namagiri. I call it the unconscious mind, trained to perfection. But we are talking about the same thing, the deepest kind of human genius. I have spent my life surrounded by extraordinary minds. If you want to hear their stories, you know where to find me.